Hello, everyone. Excited to be here, and thank you, Ariel, for joining. My name is Melanie. You just heard from my colleague Florian, but I'm a director at Artifact as well, and we've had the honor and the opportunity of working alongside Hilton for their CDP implementation over the last 2 years. So I'm excited to kind of talk through that journey and relive some of those moments, and talk about where we're heading in the future. So to start, Ariel, would love to kind of hear your background and also how long have you started working with CDPs and kind of where you first learned of Treasure Data as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is my second year at CDP World, and I'm excited this time to get to share a little bit of Hilton's perspective with you all. So I am the director of MarTech product at Hilton. I've been in technology for over 15 years, really leaning into the CDP over the last couple years. And in my role, I lead the strategic roadmap for our MarTech stack, so including the CDP, with a big focus on making sure we have capabilities in place for us to utilize our first-party data for personalization and omni-channel journey orchestration. And my team is really focused on making sure that our stack is connected to all of the right platforms so that we can action upon that. And so that's internal platforms like our digital experiences, or partner platforms, or media destinations, ESPs, that sort of thing.
Awesome. So if we take a step back, what was the main problem or business problem that Hilton was looking to solve by implementing a CDP?
So for us, and I'm guessing it was very similar for a lot of you as well, we had a lot of fragmented data. So there was a lot of different platforms, and the data was managed by a lot of different teams, which made it hard to get a view of the whole customer. We also had, because of all those different platforms and because of how large Hilton is, it was hard to activate on that data across all of our channels. Sometimes we would use some data for one channel and other data sources for another channel, and that made it really difficult. And for Hilton, it's quite a large company. We have over 9,000 hotels, over 1.3 million hotel rooms, and we're in over 139 countries and territories. And so as you can imagine, just booking data alone, that is a massive set of data, not to mention how someone engages with us across our loyalty program or our partners. And so we were setting out to find a platform that could allow us to unify that data so that we could understand what was important to the customer, where they were in their journey, instead of just keeping our data siloed and only being able to look at one journey at a time.
Definitely. I think we've spent a lot of time, even leading up to the implementation, figuring out what is the best way to not just bring all of that data together, but also in a way that made sense for all the different sides of Hilton, different departments and functions to be able to make the best out of that unified data. And so when we think about customer data maturity, what does that mean to Hilton, and where would you say you guys are on that journey today?
Yeah, so customer data journey to us is really the progression of having data to actually being able to use it to drive your business forward. And so we took the steps of first ensuring we were collecting the data, we were centralizing the data, and then we were connecting it across all the different platforms, but then also that we could derive insights from it and use it for us to be able to really understand the different dimensions of the customer. But the thing about customer data maturity is it's not one-dimensional. There's a lot of different lenses that you could take to look at where you are in your progression and in your journey. And so a couple of those that we thought about, and that are ones for you to think about in your own businesses as well, is there's the strategic lens. So how and why do we gather data? Is it just for basic metrics? Is it for you to derive insights from? Or are you actually using it to drive your strategy and to do prediction with? Another lens is the technology. What are your data capabilities? Do you have siloed data? Is it all gathered together to unify in a CDP? Have you connected it across platforms? And really, how are you ensuring that you can use AI or real-time activation to present the right thing to the right customer? And then there's the customer lens of, through your data, how well do you know your customer? Do you know just basic information like their demographics and location, or are you actually able to use your data to derive insights and intent from them and predict what they're gonna need before they even know that they need it? And then the last one is the experience and activation lens of what are you actually doing with your data? Are you having static campaigns that you're running, or are you able to dynamically pull in customer information? Are you doing that at a attribute content targeting level, or are you doing it at a true personalization level? And that's a lot of how we see it today, but with how fast technology changes, it's really important that you build a platform that's able to scale with you as technology advances and maturity advances as well.
Yeah, and I think we've had a lot of, when you think of use cases and driving value to further yourselves in that customer data maturity journey, it's not necessarily, we talk about quick wins, but especially when you're thinking about all the different lenses and dimensions of that customer data, as you just mentioned, it's definitely something that takes a lot of time. And I think especially at Hilton is, we really go deep into making sure that the experience makes sense for the guest. And so I want to talk a little bit about the customer insight. So how has the CDP helped you learn more about your customers and the guests at Hilton?
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, we've got a lot of different ways that we gather data. There's a lot of different journeys that our customers take, whether they're booking a room with us, or maybe they are joining our loyalty program, or maybe engaging with one of our partners. But those are all unique journeys that someone could be in. And so we look at those as really, what is their intent journey? Without a CDP, you look at those journeys individually and not together. The CDP helps us bring that together and to see all of the different journeys that a customer could be in at any given time and be able to really lean in on what is important to them. It helps us see the different dimensions of the customer. And then that helps us get into smarter personalization. Because if we can understand the multiple journeys that a customer's in, that gives us insights. And the CDP is where we do all of this. So the CDP helps give us insights into what dimensions of personalization we should go into. There's one-to-one personalization, but that's not always the right approach depending on the journey the customer's in and what is important to them in that journey. So being able to differentiate and say when one-to-one is where we need to lean in as a company and operationalize versus when one-to-few or one-to-many is actually the right approach to get the customer to the next stage in the process. And I think one of the things that we really narrow in on is using the CDP to get insights to understand hyper-personalization versus broader so that we can do personalization with purpose and not just do personalization for the sake of personalization.
Definitely, I think personalization is a buzzword, but it's definitely super important. And to your point, the CDP helps do that. When we talk about personalization, you mentioned how complex and vast the Hilton ecosystem is, and we can't do personalization within a silo, right? I think if we talk about personalization, we talk about omni-channel, making sure that we're reaching the right people at the right touch points. And so can you talk a little bit about how implementing a CDP has improved or influenced cross-functional collaboration at Hilton?
Yes. So Hilton is a very large company. We've got a lot of different teams, and we've got a lot of different teams that even do the same thing. We've got multiple media teams, we've got multiple marketing teams, we've got multiple technology teams. And so the CDP, and really how we've approached trying to get adoption of the CDP across all of the different teams in the organization is really leaning in on the how and the why. Our marketing teams are really the ones who narrow in on the why do we need a capability? What is it we're trying to solve with a customer, and why do we need to go after that customer? And then we partner very closely with technology on the how do we actually do that? But if we stop and we think about how a lot of our companies operate today, and especially sitting within our own CDPs, I know for us, we end up with 50 segments that are all variations or versions of each other that don't actually solve for the same why, because everyone has their own set of data that they were working on or their own perspective, and we haven't always aligned before the CDP to what is the source of truth? What is the key customer pieces of data that we need to narrow in on versus trying to look at every piece of data that we have in general, because that can be overwhelming and it can lead to people having different customer problems that they're trying to solve. And so bringing in the CDP has been great for collaboration for us because it has given, this is the source of truth. We are aligning as a company to this being an enterprise solution instead of just a marketing tool. And because that alignment is there, and everyone's recognizing that the CDP has the key data points, not all of the data points that exist at Hilton, but the ones that actually matter to communicate with the customer, it's brought us all together to look at the same why and how for how we want to solve a customer problem. And so that has removed silos, it's increased collaboration, and it has led to us being able to activate more things than we had even initially put on our roadmap this year, because other teams saw the value of using the CDP capabilities and using that one source of truth for who the customer is.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point when you think about bringing all of your customer data into CDP. We often don't take time to take a step back as we're thinking through the implementation plan of what really is the data that is important, what's not just going to drive value in the short term, but in the long term, to your point, making sure that we're building a platform and a system that provides value now and also has an infrastructure for future use cases, more advanced use cases, and deeper insight. So I think that's a super great point that making sure you have those right customer data points that are meaningful are super important. Can you talk a little bit more about how these CDP capabilities are being leveraged outside of just marketing? I think sometimes, when we talk about that initial implementation, there maybe aren't all the necessary folks in the room. And I think it's been great, especially working with you guys over the last 2 years, to see the increased interest in the CDP and also bring more of those stakeholders who really should be involved and understand that data outside of just marketing, into those discussions. So how are we doing that at Hilton?
So if I'm being candid, we're still on that journey. And we haven't fully figured it out. I think it's one of those things that as you get connections in place and as teams start to see the capabilities and what the CDP can do, that generates excitement and it gets other areas of the business, whether it's our brand teams, our commercial teams, our inventory teams who deal with pricing. And once they're able to see what you can do with it and how you can use first-party data in a new way, they want to come on board. And even though we don't have all of those things figured out, and we're not activating for every single part of Hilton's organization, we do and have aligned that the CDP can drive value. And it's how do we get on the right roadmaps? But I think even when you can use different teams in the org to be advocates to generate excitement about what the capability can do, there's a big element of change management that you have to take into account, especially in a large company. Because every team has their own process and they have their own way of doing things, and it does take time to adapt from what they were doing and how they were operationalizing to actually moving to use first-party data. So for us, I think we'd put this in the column of maybe things we wish we knew before we'd implemented a CDP, because had we done that, we maybe would have planned different with other teams, gotten on more roadmaps, and started working on the change management side of it, just as much as we were working on what is the design and the architecture that we would implement.
Yeah, I think that is super important as well. Bringing in a CDP changes. I think we saw even with the example with Universal Music Group, really how you not just think about customer data, but think about the overall customer engagement journey and the touch points that are available. And so it definitely requires a lot of cross collaboration, more than I think we've ever been used to before, but it's all good. You kind of touched on it with this challenge, but what are some other challenges in just managing customer data, especially when we think about privacy and legislation, and how are we approaching that with the CDP?
Yeah, so I think something that we all probably look at when we are trying to manage our data is, one, we have to be able to trust the data that's coming in. I think there's a lot of things that we collect that we maybe shouldn't be trusting the way that they come in, just as raw data points. So there's the trusting the data. There is making sure that we have consent to use the data. And then there's using it well when we have consent to use it. And really when it comes down to it, bad data, duplicate data, inaccurate data, when it's being used, it can erode the confidence of the internal teams, so they won't use it, but then also for customers as well. And Customers are smart. They know their data has value. And when they give us their data, they expect that we use it in a responsible and meaningful way. And if we don't do that, if we don't actually use their data to change their experiences, to drive value for them, to have meaningful personalization, then they start to question why they even gave it to us in the first place. There's really that gap between having the data and using it the way that you need to drive your business forward. And so I think the biggest challenge is honoring it in the way that they've given us consent to do it and activating it in a way that's easy for them to do. And once you can do that, once you have clean data, once you've got trusted data and you've got teams buy-in for how they use it and customers are willing to give it to you and consent for it, it's a really big unlock for what you can provide from a performance perspective. But it is a constant journey because every customer that comes in, you're having to prove to them every time they interact with you that you are using their data responsibly. And so, you can get to success with it and you can drive it with one campaign, but you have to have those same guardrails and that same rigid approach every single time so that for every campaign it could be successful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're sitting in a room of over 500 customers and hopefully some Hilton customers as well. But I think we can all attest to it only takes one small slip up from a brand to create some sort of negative sentiment where you guys don't know me, I've been purchasing from you for X amount of time, and kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth. So I think the CDP not only helps to, of course, make sure you're personalizing in the right way, but also managing your consent. And I think, at Hilton, we definitely have a rigorous and maybe even some new processes that we put in place to make sure that we're managing that responsibly within the CDP. We can't leave today without talking about Agentic and AI. It is the hot topic. I think that's on everyone's mind. And so I'm curious what potential you see for Gen AI to enhance the use of CDP at Hilton.
So a lot of the AI pieces have been touched on, and I'm sure will be continued to be touched on this week. But it's really, where can we use AI to get the person out of it and to get the person focused on strategy instead of tasks? So when we think about it, a lot of these small agents that have been talked about, those are a lot of the things that we're interested in. So how do we drive operational efficiencies? How do we take things that could be manual and put it into an AI for the AI to be able to do it? The accelerated insights with being able to surface up trends and help understand insights of the customer and what they're wanting to do so that we can react faster. Customers expect things to be quick. They expect it to be in real time, if not in very near real time. So we are always thinking about how do we use the technology to get closer to that and meet the customer with those insights before they fall out, before they abandon us, and before they move on to a competitor. So I think we're looking at it from that perspective. There's also the side of being able to understand the data. So just internally, there's a lot of people in our company who work with data, and everyone has a slightly different perspective depending on where they sit in the org. So how can we use Gen AI to help them understand the data in an easy way so that they can pick it up and actually use the insights versus the insights being there and being available, but people not actioning upon them?
I think there's even the understanding what data exists. To your point, people have different questions about what kind of data is in there, but maybe there isn't a full understanding of the actual breadth of data because of, maybe where they sit in the org or what they've known to date. And so, I think it sounds like insights, being able to talk to your data, I think is something that we've kind of been hearing a lot. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about the complex attributes and data setup that you may have. And so you touched on this a bit, but want to go a little bit deeper. Does Hilton imagine CDP or having your CDP become more of an agentic system that maybe could make decisions and action them on their own? How are you seeing that journey as the CDP within the overall AI and agentic journey?
So we definitely see agentic AI as being something that is a value driver in your CDP. I think there's a few different things, though, that we're trying to look at is how do you light it up in a responsible way so that you are using it to really understand what is the business value you're going to get from it, not just using it for the sake of using it. And so when we think about that, there's a lot of foundational elements that you have to have in order for agentic AI to really be successful. And so that's not just things that exist within your CDP, but it's how do you connect your CDP to other parts of your organization? So how do you have content? And you could be generating content, but then it's got to go into other systems in order to be displayed. So how do you think about the foundation of either utilizing an existing content library alongside Gen AI or agentic AI, or how do you use the tool itself to make the content that's brand focused and that is something that we can light up without having to have someone go back and rebuild it? And so there's the side of content. There's also the measurement. There's a lot of difficulty right now because this is new and there's not the foundation. So especially as we think about measuring success of AI, that's another piece of it. And then there's also the consent, because you've got to do it with guardrails in place. There has to be a responsibility to ensure that we're protecting customer data, that we're giving the right people access to the right data, that we're exposing the right data to customers. So we are excited about it, but we are cautiously optimistic because we've got to go into it with how do we build a foundation to use this tool that can be scalable across our business and not just move forward with it in the CDP without having the idea and the framework to scale it.
Great. And one last question, because I see we're just at time. But what advice would you give for other organizations who are looking to leverage CDPs and generative AI for marketing strategies?
So I think the first thing is it is very easy to be excited about the concept of AI. But I think before you move forward with anything, you have to take a step back and you have to say, where am I actually set up for AI to be successful? You can't take an existing problem and put AI on it and think that's going to solve your problem. If there's not the right frameworks in place, if there's not clean content, if there's not consents baked in, then AI isn't going to fix that. It's going to take the things that you are set up and doing well, and it's going to accelerate them faster than you could do manually, but it can't fix the problem on your behalf. So really focusing in on where can we actually drive value today, and how do we start testing there versus using AI to just solve a business problem that you already don't know how to address. And then the other side that kind of feeds into that is how do you scale it and how do you make it operational? And if you don't build it in a workflow that can scale it quickly, you're not going to see the business value. There was an MIT study that was done earlier this year that said only 5% of companies that start pilots actually implement. And it's because they get excited and they move forward so fast with AI without figuring out how they can use it in their business. And then in that same study, they said 95% of companies aren't seeing an actual financial return because they may have gotten it out there, but again, they couldn't scale it. So taking that moment to step back and really evaluate where can I drive this within my business and using that to determine how and when you implement AI versus using it just because you have a business problem.
Definitely. Well, we're at time. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your attention. It's been a great journey so far and we're excited to continue alongside you guys. Thank you.